What's up, Trekkies? Hi. So, yeah, there actually isn't too terribly much news. Once you come out with an expansion, things tend to kind of, for a little while. They're still putting out stories and, like, stuff. They're also probably gearing up for Star Trek Las Vegas, which is pretty much the only convention that effectively happens. Cryptic's always been there, or has been there for at least for the last 5 years. I'm not sure if they were there the very first, whatever, but it's STLV 50 because it's the 50th anniversary. Priority 1 is going to get a special panel there. I don't know what it is. It's probably Cryptic's podcast. Link below to the announcement for that. It's not much. Like the Star Trek's Online's lead designer, Al Captain Gecko Rivera, will be there. So it looks like fun. I don't know. Probably not a lot of y'all are going, but if you happen to be in Vegas this weekend, because it's apparently on the 6th, 2 p.m. Join us in the Roddenberry stage at Cork's Bar on Saturday, the 6th of August. There's a story that is Pandora's Gift. It's about the Tutarians and the Sphere Builders. Kind of what these little stories are not like things that we would get in line with stuff, but it kind of fleshes out the universe a little bit. So the fact that this one is basically that the Tutarians, or the Sphere Builders, are not completely a homogenous goal. There's dissonance within it. What we got here? Then there's the history, which is what this is mainly going to be about. So it's been, this is a long thing. It's got various pictures. It's sort of like the recap, but this is not recapping the story, but recapping the company, the game, I guess. I read through this and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And I've learned some information, like this was the original plan was to put Star Trek Online on the Xbox 360. And that is why so many things in the game originally came in fours. 4 power levels, 4 bridge officers, 4 forward, 4 aft slots, 4 device slots, etc. So if you're ever wondering why there's like 4 of everything, it's because they were gearing it for a console, which was way back when, like 6 years ago. But then they were like, no, we can't do this, not fast enough. So now they're doing it, but they're doing it also for the PlayStation. It's become ridiculously successful on the computer because that's where they decided to continue. It says it launched on February 12th, 2010. It had a level cap of 40 and 1.5 playable factions. For those of you who are so new to the game, you had to get to level 25 before you could even roll a Klingon. And then you rolled a Klingon and they pretty much put you at level 20 right away. And you leveled from there. There was no tutorial. You just like started a Klingon and you went through like 1 or 2 missions that were like on First City. Did First City even exist? No, First City didn't even exist. You just sort of started on Kronos. It was, because you need a tutorial. You only did it on your Federation. That's why there's, in a weird way, there's so many Federation characters versus the other ones, because so many people that started in the game originally. But yeah, it was level 40. We're now 60. We've had 3 level increases, and that's 40 to 45, 45 to 50, 50 to 60. So I've got that one. That was also back in what I call the dark days of having to spec into your weapons. You had to spec into your weapon type, and I've previously covered this one on my skill tree revamp. That the very first one, you actually had like starship weapons was a skill. And then it was like Starship energy weapons, Starship projectile weapons. No, it was energy and projectile weapons had their own 9 points of skill. And then you had phaser, disruptor, plasma, tetrion, polaron, antiproton. Each of those had 9 skill points. And they were like phaser and disruptor were on the same vertical level. If you remember this skill tree 2.0, they were on the same level. Plasma and tetrion were on the same level, and polaron and antiproton were on the same power level. The same thing with the torpedoes. You had photon and quantum, plasma and transphasic, chronoton and tricobalt, as well as projectile weapons. Like projectile weapons was like, let's give a small boost to all projectile weapons, but if you really, really want to be doing shit with something, you do it with, so a lot of people had like nothing in the other ones and then like put like a couple points in antiproton, and then they made antiproton beam boats. But once Skill Tree 2.0 came out, they pretty much did away with speccing into your actual weapon. They cleaned up some other things in science, and they boosted like how graviton generators worked. But that was in the dark days. You had to unlock the Klingons by first leveling a Federation captain. The game launched with 19 playable ships for Federation, 6 of which were at the end game, about a dozen playable ships for Klingons. Starship combat was a big deal, it was revolutionary, it honored the intellectual property, and it was, and continues to be, arguably the best part of Star Trek Online. But we're far from done. That's just like the very beginning part. And I love space combat. I don't really like ground, but I do it. I keep myself up to date because there are missions, you know, that you do on ground. That's like, you know, inside, like when you do run around with Tuvok, you have to fight, you know, and so it's like you have to have a modicum of ground, and like you can do like what Aaron does. He has a modicum of ground ability, but he's not good at ground. So, which is fine. But I can actually do a ground mission on advanced. Level 2. I can't do, yeah. Basic, advanced, elite. I can do it on advanced. I can do everything on advanced at this point, but because I'm just not really ready to supercharge everything. And what they mean by 6 of the ships were at endgame was the fact that there were, crazy, you actually had to spec into your ship too. I forgot about that one. Down at Admiral, there were 6 slots for you to spec into your ship. And the reason why is because you had 3 professions and 2 break off of each of them as a sub-spec. And you can see that now in ships. There's like, it's a cruiser, but is it tactically minded or science minded? Now they've brought off 3 where you can have even more engineering. And that's how like the Vesta happens. And that's why the Vesta has its thing, the Odyssey has its trio. Everything has a trio now, but it's still a baseline ship. But originally there was, you know, like the research science vessel, reconnaissance science vessel, which was the Titan. And then there was the deep space science vessel, which was a science vessel with engineering, versus the reconnaissance science, was science with tactical. So it had more tactical consoles, and in the place of a lieutenant tactical, it, you know, instead of a lieutenant engineering and an ensign engineering, it had a lieutenant. Yeah. The ships made sense when the game launched. They make sense now, kind of, but there's just a crap ton of ships now, and there's just a lot. And then plus we have all the specializations, which provides more diversity in ships. And then they talk about all the seasons here. Season 1 was the very first update. They actually talk about in this paragraph mostly season stuff. And they started fleshing out the Klingon stuff. They started adding more missions to Klingons. They brought in the Davidians and many other, just started adding little missions. And like Crossfire brought up major updates to ground combat, including shooter mode. Was not when the game launched. I've been kind of a retrospective at the, you know, I don't want to say nostalgia because I really, in terms of what the game is now, I didn't like it back then. I loved it then. I don't like, with the future knowledge of what it turned into, what it was. So there's not really nostalgia happening other than like that weird backwards nostalgia where it was like, it was so crap back then and we loved it. Season 5, A Call to Arms. It was the first major skill revamp. It took us 5 seasons to get that. This was year and a half later, they revamped the skills. Several new starships, including 3 Federation ships and 9 Klingon ships. We saw the addition of several new gear sets, including Omega, Mako, Honor Guard, and Riemann prototype sets. There was no sets of gear until this point. For a year and a half, there was no sets of gear. And in January 5th, 2012, they made the controversial decision to go free to play. So for almost 2 years, this was subscription based. And then the second anniversary, Under Siege, is when Fleet Star Bases came in. That was fun. And people built up their star bases. And then season 7 was New Romulus. That was November 13th, 2012. So and February 2010 to, so over 2.5 years later, the first expansion. The third anniversary, expansion 1, Legacy of Romulus. Okay, so we had New Romulus, we did that for a little while, and then we got actual like Romulans as a playable race. So yeah, expansion 1, Legacy of Romulus was 30 years into the game. So it's like, wow. And they had to flesh some things out before they started, you know, adding in new things. May 21st, 2013. And then that's when we started moving into the Dyson spheres, and the Undine went all nuts. Then we started doing the Delta Quadrant, and most of the people that watch my vlogs now have been playing since then. A few of you are starting about the Iconians and stuff. So you're looking at like Season 9 and the 5th anniversary, Expansion 2, Delta Rising, you know, Iconian War, all that jazz. But this is really nice to read and kind of go through and just see how the developers did stuff. And the fact that, you know, we had sector blocks. Most people will remember the non-conjoined map. I was kind of hoping we'd have an alpha and beta quadrant combined so that it would be longer, but I can see how they wanted more squares to deal with stuff rather than, you know, having like, I want to go from Gamma Orionis to there, and you have to like clip like right there where Earth is at. Yeah. I can see how that, who knows, they may, you know, bump up the alpha quadrant more and bump it down to make it more fleshed out and then combine them both later. I mean, at this point, the game isn't even what it was when it started, so all my predictions and what I think can't happen are off the table. I'm just going with what they tell me is going to happen. I'm just like, this is amazing! Okay, so that's pretty much like my weird nostalgia, and being like a weird hipster was like, it was so cool. It wasn't cool back then. It was cool, you know, you all know what I mean. It was cool because it was like a Star Trek game, and it was awesome, and then they kept making it better and better and better, and now I'm sitting here just like, how did I play that back then? It's so crappy. But anyways, I will chat with you guys later. Also, in terms of just generalized Star Trek news, don't be a weirdo. Go see Star Trek Beyond. Don't be a weirdo. Don't be like, oh, I don't like the JJ verse because blah, blah, blah. Go and see the movie. Bye.